What if everything you've been told about winning arguments in relationships is completely wrong? Most men believe that if they can just explain themselves clearly enough, logically enough, or passionately enough, a woman will finally understand their point of view. They think the solution is better communication, stronger arguments, or more evidence. But what if the very act of arguing is the problem? What if every time you enter an argument determined to prove you're right, you're unknowingly destroying the very thing you're trying to protect? Most men never realize this. They assume the disagreement is about facts, about who said what, about who forgot something, about who made the mistake. But female psychology often operates on a level that many men fail to see. And once you understand this hidden dynamic, you'll never look at arguments the same way again. Think about the last major disagreement you had with a woman. Maybe it started with something small, a text message, a forgotten promise, a comment she didn't like. At first, it seemed simple enough. You explained your side, she explained hers. Then somehow the conversation spiraled. Suddenly, you're defending yourself. She's becoming more emotional. You're becoming more frustrated. And before long, neither of you are talking about the original issue anymore. Sound familiar? Here's the strange part. Many men walk away from these situations believing they lost because they didn't make their point strongly enough. But the truth is often the exact opposite. The more they tried to win, the more they lost. But here's where it gets interesting. A woman is rarely evaluating only your words during an argument. She's observing something much deeper: your emotional control, your confidence, your ability to remain grounded under pressure, your reactions, and most importantly, whether she can influence your emotional state. Pay close attention because this changes everything. The moment you become emotionally reactive, the entire dynamic shifts. What started as a disagreement suddenly becomes a test. Not a test of intelligence, not a test of logic, a test of emotional strength. And this is where most men unknowingly fail, because they keep focusing on what they're saying, while she is paying attention to something entirely different. What happens next may surprise you. Now let's uncover the first psychological principle that most men never understand. When a woman becomes emotional during a disagreement, many men immediately assume she wants solutions. So they start explaining, defending, correcting, justifying, and sometimes even presenting evidence like a lawyer in a courtroom. On the surface, this seems logical. After all, if there's a misunderstanding, shouldn't more information solve it? Not necessarily, because in many situations, the argument isn't really about the issue itself, it's about emotions. Imagine a woman says, "You never make time for me anymore." A man immediately responds, "That's not true. Last week we went out twice. I called you every day. I was busy with work." Logically, his response makes sense, but emotionally, he just missed the real message. What she often hears is, "Your feelings are wrong," and the argument gets worse. Most men never realize this. The more they defend themselves, the more resistance they create. The more resistance they create, the more emotional she becomes. The more emotional she becomes, the more they feel the need to defend themselves. And suddenly, both people are trapped in a cycle that seems impossible to escape. But here's where it gets interesting. High-value men approach these situations differently. Instead of reacting immediately, they pause. Instead of rushing to prove a point, they observe. Instead of trying to control the conversation, they control themselves. That distinction changes everything, because emotional self-control communicates something powerful. It tells her, "I don't need to fight for validation. I don't need to force you to agree with me. I'm secure enough to remain calm." And confidence is often felt more strongly than it is heard. Think about two men. One becomes defensive the moment he's challenged. The other remains calm, composed, and unshaken. Which one appears stronger? Which one seems more confident? Which one seems more attractive? The answer is obvious. Yet when emotions rise, many men abandon that strength without realizing it. What happens next may surprise you. Sometimes the strongest response is not another argument. Sometimes it's silence, not weak silence, not avoidance. Strategic silence, the kind that comes from confidence rather than fear. Because when you stop feeding emotional tension, something unexpected begins to happen. The entire dynamic starts to shift. And this leads us to one of the most misunderstood aspects of female psychology, a pattern that explains why some men constantly get pulled into emotional battles while others seem to effortlessly maintain respect and attraction. And once you understand this pattern, you'll never respond to conflict the same way again. But to see it, we need to go even deeper. Now we're entering the part that changes how you see relationships forever. Because the biggest mistake men make isn't arguing, it's failing to understand what the argument often reveals. Most men focus on the words being spoken, but female psychology frequently operates beneath the words. And when you learn to recognize this, you begin seeing patterns that were invisible before. Imagine this scenario: you're having a perfectly normal day, everything seems fine. Then suddenly, a woman challenges something you said, questions your decision, disagrees with your opinion, or brings up an issue that appears completely unnecessary. Your immediate reaction might be, why is she creating a problem out of nothing? But what happens next may surprise you. Sometimes the issue itself isn't the most important thing. Your reaction is. Pay close attention because this changes everything. Many women consciously or unconsciously observe how a man handles emotional pressure, not because they're trying to create conflict, but because emotional stability is one of the strongest indicators of confidence, leadership, and security. Think about it. Anyone can appear strong when everything is going well. Anyone can appear confident when they're being praised. The real question is, who are you when you're challenged? Who are you when someone disagrees with you? Who are you when emotions enter the room? This is where many men unknowingly sabotage themselves. A simple disagreement turns into defensiveness. Defensiveness becomes frustration. Frustration becomes anger. And suddenly the woman isn't focused on the original issue anymore. She's watching a man lose control of himself. Most men never realize this. They think they're defending their position, but from her perspective, they're revealing their emotional weaknesses. But here's where it gets interesting. The men who naturally command respect often do the opposite. When challenged, they don't rush to react. They don't feel an urgent need to prove themselves. They don't become emotionally hijacked. Instead, they stay centered, calm, grounded, almost unaffected. And that emotional steadiness creates something powerful, because calmness under pressure communicates strength far more effectively than aggression ever could. This doesn't mean becoming passive. It doesn't mean agreeing with everything. And it certainly doesn't mean letting people walk over you. In fact, it's the opposite. True strength is the ability to maintain your position without losing your composure, the ability to stand firm without becoming emotional, the ability to disagree without turning the interaction into a battle. And this is where attraction dynamics begin to shift dramatically, because when a man remains emotionally stable while everyone else is reacting, he instantly becomes different from the majority. Different in a way that is often felt more than explained. But there's an even deeper layer to this psychology, a layer that explains why some men earn lasting respect while others constantly find themselves trapped in endless cycles of conflict. And once you understand that final piece, everything starts making sense. That's exactly what we'll uncover next. By now, you've seen why arguing rarely produces the result most men expect. You've learned that emotional control often matters more than logical victory. You've discovered that many disagreements reveal far more about a man's emotional state than about the actual issue being discussed. But now we arrive at the principle that separates respected men from men who constantly find themselves stuck in exhausting relationship drama. And this is where most men get it wrong. They assume respect is earned by winning, winning the debate, winning the disagreement, winning the point. But female psychology often responds more strongly to certainty than persuasion. Think about that for a moment. A man who constantly argues is often trying to convince. A man who is truly confident rarely feels the need to. Most men never realize this. The more desperately you try to make someone agree with you, the more power you hand over. Why? Because you're communicating that their approval has become emotionally important to you, and the moment that happens, your emotional center shifts outside of yourself. But here's where it gets interesting. The strongest men have a different mindset. When conflict appears, they don't immediately ask, "How do I win this argument?" They ask, "How do I handle this situation in a way that reflects who I am?" That single shift changes everything. Imagine a woman says something unfair during an emotional moment. Many men instantly fire back. They defend, attack, counterattack, escalate. And now both people are fighting for emotional dominance. But a confident man often chooses another path. He listens. He evaluates. He decides whether a response is even necessary. And sometimes the most powerful response is surprisingly simple. "I understand how you feel." Not because he agrees, not because he's surrendering, but because he understands that acknowledging emotions is different from accepting blame. That distinction is incredibly important. Most arguments continue because people confuse understanding with agreement. They think, if I acknowledge her feelings, I'm admitting she's right. But that's not true. You can understand someone's feelings while maintaining your position. You can remain respectful without becoming submissive. You can stay calm without becoming weak. Pay close attention because this changes everything. The goal is not to dominate the conversation. The goal is to master yourself within the conversation. And when a man develops that skill, something fascinating happens. He becomes far more difficult to manipulate emotionally, far more difficult to provoke, far more difficult to pull into unnecessary drama. And with that comes a level of respect many men spend years chasing. But there's one final lesson, the most important lesson of all, the lesson that ties every piece of this puzzle together. And once you understand it, you'll know exactly what to do the next time conflict appears in your life. So, what should you do instead of arguing? This is the question that changes everything, because by now you've seen a pattern. Arguments rarely fail because of a lack of logic. They fail because emotions take control. They fail because people become focused on winning instead of understanding. And they fail because most men react when they should be responding. That's the biggest revelation of this entire video. The opposite of arguing isn't silence, it isn't submission, and it certainly isn't weakness. The opposite of arguing is emotional leadership. Most men never realize this. When tension rises, the strongest position is often to remain centered, while everyone else is becoming reactive. Think back to everything we've discussed. A woman becomes emotional. Most men immediately defend themselves. The conversation escalates. Respect decreases. Frustration grows. Nobody wins. But a man who understands female psychology approaches the situation differently. First, he controls his emotions before trying to control the conversation. Second, he listens for the feeling behind the words. Third, he responds calmly instead of reacting impulsively. And fourth, he knows when a discussion is productive and when it's simply becoming emotional chaos. What happens next may surprise you. When you stop trying to win every disagreement, you often gain something much more valuable: respect. Because respect grows when people see consistency, when they see emotional stability, when they see someone who remains grounded regardless of circumstances. Pay close attention because this changes everything. Your greatest power in any relationship is not your ability to argue, it's your ability to remain in control of yourself. A man who can manage his emotions is difficult to manipulate, difficult to provoke, difficult to shake, and that kind of emotional strength creates a presence that people naturally respect. Remember this: you do not need to raise your voice to be heard. You do not need to prove your worth in every disagreement. You do not need to win every argument to win in life. Sometimes the strongest move is to stay calm. Sometimes the smartest move is to step back. And sometimes the most powerful response is the one that protects your peace instead of your ego. Because at the end of the day, confidence isn't about controlling other people, it's about controlling yourself. And once you master that skill, every relationship in your life begins to change. Now I'd like to hear from you. Have you ever stayed calm during an argument and noticed the entire situation shift? Share your experience in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another deep dive into female psychology, attraction, confidence, and relationship dynamics. Thanks for watching, and remember, the man who masters his emotions will always have an advantage over the man who tries to win every argument. We'll see you in the next video.